Okay, then. I think we'll make a start. There will be one or two people joining us as we move through today's session, but we will get going because we've got a fantastic program today. So let me start, first of all, by formally saying good morning to people in my sort of time zone, UTC, GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, British Summer Time we are now, which is different to UTC, but those of you in my part of the world, it's not a bad time of day to join. So good morning to those of you. For lots of colleagues in Asia, it's good afternoon. Good evening to some extremely in Asia, but definitely good afternoon to a lot of colleagues here today. And for those colleagues in North America, we're really sorry. It's not an ideal time of day. So we really appreciate those of you joining from the Americas in particular. That really is dedication. So big bonus points for those of you joining us from that part of the world. So I'm Dr. Julian Scum. I'm the Executive Director of Social Responsibility at the University of Manchester. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's international panel on service learning and social responsibility in education. This is a seminar organised through the USR network, the University Social Responsibility Network. This is a global alliance of universities who are dedicated to promoting and implementing university social responsibility and really tries to expand the traditional role of a university to actively encourage engagement with society and the societal issues. So we're here today exploring something I think we all care deeply about. This is why we're here, of course, how we equip our students not just to learn, but to lead, and to lead with empathy, to lead with cultural awareness, and also to lead with a sense of purpose that reaches beyond the lecture theatre, the laboratory, and the classroom. So we often talk about universities making an impact and creating partnerships in the real world. We use this phrase, the real world, and we can do this through our two core functions, of course, as universities, through our research and through our education. And service learning is one of the most powerful ways we can use our core education function to bridge the academic and the societal, bringing some of the theories and concepts to life through action, through reflection, and through connection to the real world, and creating some of these mutually beneficial partnerships based on real societal needs. So that's the background today, why we think it's such an important topic. Let me say something about the format now, because today's format is quite simple, but it's very rich. We're going to start with a keynote case study from Dr. Grace Niai at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, showcasing their ambitious and inspiring commitment to making service learning a core part of their undergraduate education. So Grace, we're really looking forward to hearing from you in a moment. But once Grace has presented, we're then going to hear some brief reflections and responses from three expert colleagues working in very different contexts. I'm really excited about this. We've got Assistant Professor Dennis Kilala from the University of the Philippines. We've got Miss Ming Hui from SUS in Singapore, and Dr. Eugene Mashimina from the University of Pretoria. And following that, I'll open the floor for audience questions. So please start thinking of those now, and then I'll wrap up with a few closing reflections. So if you've got a question, please just jot it down to yourself, and you be free to ask that question when we get to that. So without further ado, let's dive into what promises to be a really rich conversation today about how we shape socially responsible graduates for a complex and connected world. So Grace, please over to you to kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian. Hello, everybody. So this is from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. So some time ago, also at one of these forums, we shared about how we were institutionalizing social responsibility education in the form of service learning for all of our undergraduates. And today, we'll take it one step further in talking about another aspect of undergraduate education that pretty much all universities will be concerned about, and that is internationalization, that is global learning, that is getting increasingly important in this world that is, like it or not, getting more and more interconnected. So at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, a bit of a background, service learning is an academic requirement for all of our undergraduate students. So you can see here our structure, our undergraduate structure. We have the general university requirements that are required for everybody, and then we have our major and our minor, and service service learning is right smack in the middle of our general university requirements as a 3-credit subject. So at PolyU, a service learning subject will basically have the same workload. We expect the same workload from all of our students as our regular academic subjects. We have approximately 60 hours of teaching, lectures, student self-study, preparation, whatever. And then the unique thing is that we have got 40 hours where students are expected to go on the front lines and carry out the service learning project. And we have service learning projects that reflect the whole breadth of different subjects, of different disciplines that are offered at the university. And then, of course, there's reflection and evaluation to link together the experience with the academic learning. And at PolyU, we have over 70 3-credit subjects from more than 30 academic units. Now, so that is the service learning part. What about the global learning part? So at PolyU, what we want to do is that we want to nurture socially responsible professionals and leaders with a strong sense of national pride and a global perspective. That is in our university mission. And to do that, what we are aiming to do is that by 2027-28, all of our undergraduate students will be required to participate in at least one non-local learning experience, be it exchange, be it internship, or be it service learning, through which 50% of our undergraduate students are expected to fulfill their non-local learning experience via service learning outside of Hong Kong. Now, just to give you a sense of scale, we are talking about 2,500 students doing non-local service learning every year. Okay, and our university has been very farsighted in establishing a non-local study fund that gives a basic subsidy of $10,000 per student to cover the expenses incurred from these experiences. Now, of course, that is going to create quite a bit of a challenge. And of the challenges, I'm picking up 3 of the most obvious ones to share with everybody. So the first challenge is, are we requiring academic staff to moonlight, right? I mean, service learning is an academic subject, but academic staff, all of us, we are not, tourism exists as a discipline for a reason. It is something that's complex. It is something that's complicated. There are a lot of concerns that people need to worry about, right? And by saying that non-local service learning is required for so many students, what requirements, what demands are we placing on the academic staff who already honestly are busy enough with teaching and research? Okay. The second concern, the second challenge, which I personally feel to be the biggest challenge or the biggest concern is, are we teaching a holier-than-thou attitude to our students? When we bring students outside of their home to do service learning in another community, not their own, what are we teaching them? Okay, we certainly do not want to replicate some of the mistakes made by former years of colonization or whatever. Okay, now, given that now we are bringing our students out, how are we going to mitigate against those potentially harmful implications? Okay, and then the third is, given that the world is a much less friendly place nowadays than it used to be just like 5-7 years ago, how about geopolitical tensions? How do we navigate that? Okay, now looking at these 3 particular concerns, talking about academic staff moonlighting, that was actually the easiest situation for us to serve, because what could be done there was that the university basically put resources into building a central office, and through this we built some bases, so to speak, right? So here we see 2 of our biggest bases. This in mainland China in Yunnan, South Central China. Oops, sorry about that. And then the other one in the Philippines. Yeah, and you can see the vast numbers of students that are on the ground at the same time. And through these non-local bases, we pledge to academic staff that we will find them a suitable partner, will help them with the logistics, with the negotiations, we'll supplement them with appropriate activities. We will have somebody on the ground. Essentially, what we are trying to send to academic staff is, you worry about your subject, you worry about the academics, you worry about teaching the students, okay? be the front, be the student-facing side. The students' learning is your concern. Everything else, let us handle it. Okay, and what we are finding is that that actually has been very helpful for getting past the initial resistance, intimidation that academic staff quite understandably are going to have when they are faced with this rather daunting prospect of how do I bring like 40, 60, 100 students outside of Hong Kong to do service learning. Now, the second issue, the holier than thou issue, now that arguably is harder to address. And there are many different ways that you can address it. What we have tried to do ourselves at PolyU is that for most of our service learning projects, especially for all of our non-local bases, we try to build in a very heavy dose of reciprocal learning. And we do this through a trilateral partnership. Traditional service learning has the university, the service provider, and the community, the service recipient. What we do is that we try to build in another aspect of it through a local university or local college. So some examples, for example, in the Philippines, we saw the picture just now at the bottom. This is our university, Polytechnic, together with the University of the Philippines. Okay, in Indonesia, we partnered together with the China Christian University, Malaysia with Taylor's University, I see them here, and South Africa, very obviously, the University of Pretoria. Now, what that does is that it gives our students the opportunity to work together with peers that are different from themselves. In Hong Kong, like it or not, many of our students come from a very homogeneous background. For many of them, this opportunity will be the first time they have ever interacted with a person of a different race or ethnicity as a peer. Okay, not as a teacher, not as a helper, but as a peer level. And we find that for many of our students, that is something that's very eye-opening for them. Okay, I wouldn't go so far as to say transformational, that takes a lot more, right? But it's eye-opening for them. Another thing that we also do is that we curate the experience. In addition to the service learning project, we curate the experience with an intention. The intention is to provide them an all-rounded view of the community that they are serving in, of the country in which the community is situated. And we feel that that is especially important when we are talking about international service learning. So for example, in Rwanda, we obviously bring our students to understand the history of the country, right? The King's Palace, the far past, recent history, the Genocide Museum, not very pleasant, but it's something that's very needed to understand. But also at the same time, their central business district, the current, and the future, the drone medical supply chain, right? What we're trying to do is that we want our students to get a fair view, okay, of the country, to see the potential of the place that they are working in, as well as the needs of the community. In some ways, sometimes I say, I want my students to come away feeling a tad bit envious, right? To have a bit of admiration for the place that they were working in, for the communities that they were helping, not just simply to have compassion, but also to be a tad bit envious, right? And that's something that we try very intentionally to build in. The third piece is geopolitical tensions. And I mean, very honestly, there's not much that we can do about that. But one thing here that I would like to quote from our president, and I really admire what he said here. When I asked him about it, what he said was that as universities, we should always do what is possible. And that is in contrast to trying to avoid what might not be possible, right? Instead of trying to anticipate what might not be possible, we should just basically take the future with both hands, try to do what is possible, right? On the other hand, we also build in redundancies, right? Just in case something happens, right? But at the very least, we try to build bridges, we try to do what is possible. And that is something that we have been trying to do with service learning. So just to give some examples of our non-local service learning sites. So in Rwanda, we have had a big site that's been in place since 2013, been expanding through the years. We work in partnership with the local NGO and the vocational college together on projects themed on sustainability. And these, so that has been a more long-running site. Some of our more recent sites are in Manila and in Yunnan, China, Yunnan mainland China, at the southwestern corner of China. These are sites that started after COVID, and you can see that both of these are in partnerships with local universities, right? The University of the Philippines, Yunnan University. something in common with these sites is that we send in very large teams. We are talking about 300, 500 students every year, sometimes 300 students on the ground at once. And what that offers us is a multifaceted way to address many different needs of the community. So we look at education, we look at healthcare, we look at social work, we look at history, et cetera, et cetera. And another bonus that we also offer is that we do teacher training on site. We use those sites as an opportunity for teachers to see what service learning is like, to experience what service learning is like in the form of an observer, and to learn about what service learning is and how they themselves can integrate service learning into their own pedagogies. So just some statistics. So this academic year, we are offering in total almost 5,000 service learning places, of which over 40% are going to be projects outside of Hong Kong. And the projects outside of Hong Kong, you can see the different places that we are working with. The majority in mainland China, and then in ASEAN, very obviously because of proximity, but we also have a growing presence that is in Africa, Rwanda projects, Tanzania, and South Africa. So that is what we are doing, right? And the next question is, so does it work, right? We want to nurture socially responsible professionals and leaders with a strong sense of national pride and the global perspective. So casting that as research, right? If we look at the research question, the students report an increase in intercultural attitude and skills following the non-local service experience. Okay, now, for this, what we did was that we looked at one single large-scale service learning course. Now, why are we looking at only one course instead of across the gamut? The reason is because of so many confounding factors, right? So we picked one of the biggest courses that we had, a very typical course, 133 students enrolled, and with 5 different projects in 5 different places, right? So basically, we're trying to keep things as constant as possible. Intercultural competency was measured by pre-post survey, adapted from the ACNU and from Potala and Chan. So some results, right? The intercultural competency is measured along 3 dimensions: the attitude, and then 2 skills: interaction, relaxation, and interaction management. I'm not going to go into the numbers. Julian is glaring at me now, looking at the time. But what you can see here is that p-value is all less than 0.001, right? So very, very statistically significant across the board. Another question we want to know is, how does it work, right? So we have got different projects like mainland China, Vietnam, Philippines, Tanzania, South Africa. Do students learn better in some projects? Do students, so what are the projects in which the students learn the best? And what are the deciding factors, right? So one of the things that we want to look at is this matter of cultural distance. Now, most of our students come from Hong Kong, SAR, and mainland China. We also have a smattering of students from different places like Taiwan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Malaysia, whatever, right? So we want to look like, there's a big difference in the culture, right? People talk about stepping out of the comfort zone. Does stepping further out of the comfort zone produce bigger gains in cultural learning, right? So the research question is cultural distance a mediating factor, right? So very briefly, again, we use a very standard measure of cultural distance, 6 dimensions of culture from Geert Hofstad's, right? And for each team, we calculate the mean cultural distance between the location of students, the location of origin of the students on the team, and their location of service, right? So basically a very complicated sort of math formula, right? But then what we see is that when we try to correlate cultural distance together with the 3 dimensions of cultural learning, we see that cultural distance is a very big determiner of students' learning, right? For attitude, and then even more so for the skills, interaction, relaxation, and interaction management. So I think that from this, we can see, yes, stepping further out of the comfort zone, if it is done well, students do learn better. And what we are seeing is that this is also evidenced through qualitative writings, reflections from students. Again, I'm not going to go through into each of them, but just to give some examples, right? We ask students to write reflections before and after the trip, and then we graded these reflections on rubrics, right? Looking at different dimensions of cultural learning. And what we can see is that we are seeing fewer students in the novice side, and then more students in the advanced and the adequate ones, which is what we all want to see from here. So this is my last slide. So some takeaways. Is it possible to achieve internationalization of global learning through service learning? The answer is yes. Okay. What we are seeing is that the trick is to make it rigorous, right? And what we see as rigorous is that there has to be accountability built in. Things have to be intentionally designed. Things have to be meaningful, and they have to be structured. We can't just simply send students somewhere and expect that they will automatically learn. Okay, that doesn't work. But when things are done well, when they're intentionally designed, when they're well structured, and also obviously when they're properly resourced so that we can talk about forward planning, okay, it is possible to kill multiple birds with the same stone, right? And what we like to say is that, yeah, a price has to be paid, but no pain, no gain. So thank you very much, Julian. I think I'm right on time.
Fantastic. That was amazing timing, Grace. And it's such an inspiring presentation to start with. Thank you so much. You really framed that with a lot of the questions built in and answers. If I may just abuse my position as chair, one very quick question before we open it up to our three respondents. Tell me something about the structure of the team that delivers this at Hong Kong PU, because it's a very impressive whole institution approach. Can you give me an idea of the scale of the team?
Sure. Yeah. So the scale of the team, now the people who are delivering all of these subjects are the academic staff. Okay, so if you consider that, let me use this one. So in this academic year, there have been about over 100 subjects offered. Okay, many of these subjects are team taught. Okay, and these are regular academic staff. So if you consider that each subject might have on average maybe 2 academic staff teaching it, you're talking about 200 academic staff, and they are teaching this as part of their workload, right? So suppose you have 3 subjects a year, this might count as 1. Okay, and then when we talk about the central office and the non-local basis, this pledge that we make, this team is about 20 people that's running it. Yeah.
Yep. Great. Thank you very much. That's really helpful to see. So that's the keynote we've had today. And that's we chose this example today because I think we all recognize Hong Kong PU really are a global leader in this and have invested in this over a very long period of time now and built up a really good evaluation framework. What we've asked now is that we have some reflections, having heard this from 3 different parts of the world. So I'd like to bring in Dennis Kalala, first of all, from the University of Philippines. Dennis is going to give just a few minutes reflection on what he's heard and compare that to the context in the Philippines, I think. So Dennis, please open it up to you now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Julian. What I'll try to do today is give a reaction to Dr. Grace's presentation, but at the same time also present some of the things that we do in the Philippines. So hitting 2 birds with 1 stone as well, like what Dr. Grace said earlier. So thanks, Dr. Ngai, for your presentation. I really appreciate the collaboration that we have. And I have seen the implementation of service learning in Hong Kong PolyU as well. It is really easy working with Hong Kong PolyU because of certain commonalities in the program implementation. For one, we have classes in the university from the 8 constituent universities of our university. We have classes that that implement service learning. We were actually surprised because our office did a scanning of the classes, and we have around 300 classes doing service learning. So it's quite easy to work with Hong Kong PolyU and link their classes with our classes. So I think that's one of the commonalities that we have. We also have classes that require our students to do community engagement. We bring our classes together, Hong Kong PolyU's classes and our classes, because we know that without sacrificing learning outcomes, we will be able to bring some good to the community. I think we also both agree that we should serve underserved areas. That's the reason why they go to the Philippines. This is also the reason why the university is going to, we do community engagement. So we both go to these places where there's a need. So far, it's in Manila, but hopefully later on, the partnership would probably bring us to other parts of the Philippines. But there are also some differences. Like for example, service learning in the in our university is not centralized as in Hong Kong PolyU. if you talk to Grace about, talking to the people in the university, we usually link them with different people because that would be those will be the best offices and classes that would be able to work with them. So we have different campuses and different programs. They implement service learning based on their learning outcomes. Even with our program with the NSTP, we cannot require all our students to do community engagement, but most of our students engage in that. And maybe now we can talk about the future of the collaboration that we have with Hong Kong PolyU. So I think in the 2 years that we've been working, um, I've been seeing it evolving. We started with 20 of their students and 10 of our students, and our students are in one particular class. But this year, we have 200 students from their side and about 50 students on our side, and not all of them are from classes, and they're not required. We have students who have volunteered, for example, to be with them in their service learning class. And this May, the ones that will be going with the Hong Kong PolyU class are all volunteers. So I think the way we implement the program together, while we share commonalities, for example, in the classes, it can go beyond that. Like, we have volunteers, we have students who want to do these things outside of their classroom without credit, but still contributing to service learning. I think that's going to be exciting as well. And maybe the question would be why we are doing this. Service would be one. That's something that is also common to Hong Kong PolyU and the University of the Philippines. And I don't know, maybe Grace would also share this, but I think personally what we want to do is to improve people-to-people relations, student-to-student relations in both Hong Kong and the Philippines. Um, Later on, I think that with the flagship program of our president to institutionalize service learning, it has been also a call in the public service summit in our university to institutionalize service learning. We are learning a lot from our collaboration with Hong Kong Poly, and I would like to think that Hong Kong Poly is also learning some things from how we do things in the Philippines. I've seen some differences also in context, in perspectives, motivations, but I think the relationship and also just bringing us together when it comes to service and community engagement and also service learning, I think the future looks great for that collaboration. So thanks for that, Julian.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dennis, for those reflections. Really appreciate them. Some very thoughtful points. We're now going to move on to Ming Hui from Singapore University of Social Sciences to offer her reflections and comparisons, contrasts to what we've heard from Hong Kong PU. So over to you, Ming. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm Ming Hui from Singapore University of Social Sciences. I'm a specialist with the College of Interdisciplinary and Experiential Learning. And I look after one of the university core courses that we offer to our full-time and part-time undergrad students. Thank you, Dr. Grace, for your presentation. It's really inspiring to hear about PolyU's service learning program and the commendable approach to integrate global learning with service learning experience into this undergraduate educations. So at the Singapore University of Social Sciences, we believe education should cultivate intellectual growth alongside civic engagement, empathy, and also a strong moral compass. So we do institutionalization of service learning as well, where service learning is embedded within our core curriculums, and it is also designed as part of the graduation requirement for all full-time and part-time graduate students. But unlike what Dr. Grace shared earlier, we do it locally. So all the students will be outgoing, working with local community in Singapore. So the as you said, as you know, the university core course, which we name it as the learning with communities, we utilize an experiential learning approach in collaboration with diverse stakeholders to empower students to navigate responsible actions for real world community impact. So the course actually spanning over 6 months enable all students to learn the skills needed to curate, to co-curate, implement, and also co-evaluate reciprocal community change initiative in collaboration with diverse stakeholders. Yeah, so when we talk about stakeholders, it's not just the NGO or what we call here in locally the social service agency, but they can work with, say, the municipal, the grassroots groups, or even the ministry. Yeah. So these students, they'll be equipped with the experience, skills, and values to continue to learn through practice and also critical reflections on what it means to do well as a way of life. So students are also given the opportunity to work with a chosen community partner to address an issue or challenge faced by the community. So it's not just on paper what students probably read from the news and then, you know, trying to imagine that, you know, these are the solution that they can propose, but they have to need to go down and meet the real community. So how do students make their choice? So this is all done during their pre-semester course registration, where they can choose from a buffet of social topics offered based on their interests, skill set, strengths, and also their individual preference. Yeah. So logistically, you know, we are talking about every semester, you know, we are offering, we are going to send out about at least 500 students out to work with community, which we need to curate at least 420 unique projects with different community partners. Yeah. So like what Dr. Grace shared, you know, there's a lot of logistical work behind the scenes. Yeah, and I can empathize and also appreciate the challenge that PolyU face in scaling this experience, especially with you know, global service learning that gonna pose more challenges. Yeah, that's all for me. Thanks, Juliet.
Thanks very much. There's some really interesting reflections there about the number of projects and some of the challenges logistically, and we might come to that in some of the questions. So thank you very much for that reflection. Our third and final reflection before we open it up to the floor is from Pretoria, and it's Dr. Eugene Mashimana, and Eugene's time zone is just an hour difference to ours, even though he's very far away from me in Manchester. So good morning, Eugene, and please, if you've got some reflections, Eugene, about what you've heard today and comparisons, contrasts with what you heard to the context in Pretoria, please. Thank you.
Good day, colleagues. Thank you, Dr. Grace. It was such an informative presentation, really. This great work that you are doing. I must also mention that I've also enrolled for your online service learning program, given the wealth of experience that you have as a university. There's much to learn from you. Yeah, there's a number of similarities and also areas of growth and learning from our sides. I'm glad to see that there's an emphasis of issues of being socially responsive in terms of preparing our global citizens, our students, really, that are global citizens who are living in a global village. However, as we do that, from the examples that you have shared from your side, is that you also make them to be relevant and be responsive even locally. It's one thing to be relevant and be responsive globally, but only to find that you are irrelevant. And with that comes the responsibility of students using locally available resources. Resources meaning issues of, it will address issues of funding and also issues of sustainability, because the program, I mean, from what I have shared, it's clearly that you try your best to make them sustainable, because as a university, you are there to enable the communities who by themselves could do some of these activities, but they need us to partner with as equal partners. And your emphasis of issues of mutual benefit, that's commendable, because if there's not that element, then there's an issue of communities may feel abused or misused in the way that we work with them as universities. And yes, having said that, it for students certainly depend their understanding in terms of their education, their enrich. And I'm glad to see that you're working towards getting a program where all the students will be exposed to non-local service learning program. We have enjoyed and we continue to enjoy partnering with you in some of the programs, including the Rwanda one. I know some of our engineering students have participated in that, so well done for that. There are a number of questions that comes with such responsibility, given the number of modules that you're involved with, the number of academic staff and your support staff. Issues such as issues of concern in terms of security for students, both local and international, which you highlighted. I mean, the geopolitics that we find ourselves in, they raise those issues as well. So with UP, some of the things that we do, we make sure that all students are required to attend a community engagement orientation before they could go out, so that we should prepare them in terms of issues of cultural diversity, in terms of issues of security. Similarly, with our academic staff, they also have to attend academic induction, all the new academics, to prepare them for the world that they're exposed to in terms of that. Coming back to the issues of communities, it's important that we don't work as silos or ivory tower rather as universities, but our communities must not only feel, but they must know that they are equal partners with us. Without them, there isn't much we can do, because we need them, they need us, we learn from them, we teach them. Similarly, that's what you are doing, the issues of co-design, the programs that you do. So I think that the question that I want to raise here is the issue of the curriculum specifically. To what degree do we allow our community to influence our curriculum? Because their voices matters not only in practice, but also in theory. In all the modules that we develop, it matters. For instance, at UP, we've got over 200 modules that are curricular community engagement, that is service learning, if I may use this term in this context, over 200 modules. About 20,000 students are involved in that. And of those, we partner with over 1,000 community partners. In 2024, in particular, it was 600 community partners that we work with. So with such a wealth of experience of those partners, so they need to really find a way to influence, and we need to create that platform for them to influence our curricula. And that also touch on issues of evaluation. It's not possible for all. I mean, you mentioned your academics about, is it 200 and the 20 that are quite closely involved? They won't be able to be all in all the sites. Hence, we need our community partners to also play a role in the issue of assessment of these modules, because these are not just voluntary projects. These are curricular projects that you are implementing. They are assessed and students reflect, as you have highlighted in those slides. So the community must play an equal role in that aspect as well. Otherwise, thank you. Well done.
Thanks very much, Eugene. Really good reflections then. We might have some questions actually about a really important point you made around how do we select these topics? Who decides on which projects happen? Is it from the inside out from universities or from the outside in? And I think that's a really important theme that you raised there. So thanks very much, Eugene. So that concludes the presentation aspects and the responses. Now we've got 15 minutes, and please raise your hands and I can go through them in order for any observations or questions. We want to get through as many of these as possible. So please don't make it another presentation when you put your hand up. Do make it a quick point or a question, and I will decide as chair whether I think all four people need to answer, or might direct some of the questions to a particular panelist given what they've said already. So just in terms of opening it up, let me just go into my participants. I can see the first hand we've got up is from Neeraj Gupta. So Neeraj, good morning, good afternoon, I should say, I think, to you, and please ask your question.
Yeah. Sir, good afternoon. I am Neeraj Gupta from DAV University, Jalandhar, India. Good afternoon to all of you. Sir, are you getting? Okay. Sir, it was really a very insightful session you have brought to our knowledge that students are learning not from their own country and also from the outside countries. So, sir, even our university, DAV University, wants to become part of this. Can you guide that how can we come in the same routing? Like we want to be the partner with other countries. Can you guide for the same?
Yeah, thanks, Neeraj. So the question now is how can we support Neeraj's institution in terms of potential partnerships around this project? So that's something, Miranda, that we can follow up outside of the meeting, if that's okay, in terms of making some contact. And if you wanted to get some further information, particularly from Hong Kong PU, that has done a great job of mentoring other institutions around the world and providing some support and advice, I'm sure we can arrange for something to be set up for some relevant colleagues in your institution to share some knowledge. So thanks for that, Neeraj. So other questions? But I just want to have as many people as possible, if that's okay, Neeraj, just because we've got limited time. So I just wondered, in terms of other themes, what from other colleagues do you hear today, or questions you would like to ask, just to open it up further, please? So Cynthia, please, I think from Singapore. Yeah.
That's right. Hi, Julian. I'm Cynthia from the Singapore University of Social Sciences. I wanted to link Eugene's comment on sustainability with what Grace was mentioning. I wondered if we thought of sustainability as also the consideration of the unintended consequences of making something compulsory at scale. So I'll give a bit of context from the Singapore perspective. The majority and all of our public universities have core curriculum, and over half of our public universities have service learning or community engagement integrated as credit-bearing parts of the core curriculum. When SUSS was revamping our core curriculum 2 years ago, there was a very strong push to want to integrate global learning with service learning into two what I think other people would call a two-course kind of course, global learning as well as service learning, 2 credits, right? There was a lot of hesitation on our part and pushback because we were concerned about the unintended consequences. So hearing from Grace, right? It's really it really takes guts. Really impressed that you've gone down this road. But I wanted to ask this question also. What does it take for us to think about the unintended consequences of impacts on the host communities, especially if it's compulsory, where there are some students, as we know, who are not willing to be there, but they have to be there, and it's an international community, right? And as UP mentioned, intentionally choose vulnerable or underserved communities as well. Connecting that, connecting that to UP's question also, I hope that PolyU has learned from UP. I'm interested in a research question. If we could even ask, how could we explore, how do we measure how other stakeholders are growing from that? Thanks.
Brilliant. That was one of the questions I had up my sleeve if somebody didn't answer. I think it's such a good question, Cynthia. And I think we'll put that to Grace then, you know, that bit about the sustainability, the scale, and what about students who might not want to be there. But also, I think that you had such a good evaluation framework there, Grace. But one of the things, I'm sure it's there, you just didn't have time to talk about this, but as well as the impact on students, what about the impact that communities feel, the stakeholders themselves, underserved communities? Where does that fit into the evaluation? So Grace, yeah, please give that a go. It's quite a few questions in there, but they're brilliant ones, Cynthia. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Julian. Thank you, Cynthia. I'll try to unpack this. So when it comes to unintended consequences, I guess maybe let's look at the different stakeholders in the whole picture, right? A lot of the concerns, Cynthia, that you mentioned were exactly the same that we went through about 13 years ago when we were debating about whether or not to make service learning a compulsory, first of all, academic credit bearing, and the second thing was compulsory. The academic credit bearing part, there was not really much of an argument that service learning is academic learning, right? So that part was okay. The compulsory part was the part that actually was more controversial, and there were a lot of the same arguments, like are we forcing volunteerism, okay, so on and so forth, like all of these things. Now, one of the things that we have found and so that is one of the things that I keep on telling different institutions, if you are thinking about doing service learning, you have to back it up with evaluation. Okay, evidence-based improvements is important. And one of the things that we have been able to show time and time again is that through evidence-based evaluations is that actually students who take the service learning because they are forced to do not learn less than those who take it because they care about the community, because they're interested in the project, so on and so forth. Okay, so that is one thing that we have seen from the student side, that that the service learning requirement does not seem to have to backfire, so to speak, and to poison the pool, all of those things that people oftentimes bring up. Okay, so from the student side, I think that part is okay. Now, from the community side, that is more of a prickly issue, and that is harder to evaluate, I do have to say. One of the ways that we guard against it is that we try to have very intentionally and very carefully designed and curated projects and experiences. Okay, so we try our best through the design of the projects that at least do no harm. Okay, and do some good. I think more than that, it might also be instrumental at this point to bring in to ask Dennis for his feedback as well, considering that we sent 300 students, 290 something students to Manila in January. And honestly, not all of those students wanted to go. Many of them were taking it because they had to, and also because it was quote unquote a free trip offered by the university. But Dennis, on your side, how did your community see it? Because you were on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, so thank you, Grace, for that. The first thing is really determining the needs of the community. We will not be linking Hong Kong PolyU and our students with the community if, for example, the projects that will be presented by our classes will not be meeting the needs of the community. So we try to ensure that. So, for example, again, they brought in more than 100 students from the School of Optometry, and we identified 2 schools that with elementary school students, basic education students, and the community itself. I mean, the city is requiring their students to have their eyes checked. So I think there's a need in the community. This is something that Hong Kong PolyU and UP can do in the community, and because there's the response to the needs of the community fit, then we link them together. But if it's not like that, then it's going to be very difficult. So we try to look for communities that would be requiring the services that will be provided by our students. It also requires a lot of preparation, not only among our students, but also to the communities. So, students from Hong Kong PolyU, students from UP will be coming here. This is what they'll be doing, so that they'll also be prepared for hundreds of people going to their community. So I think those are the things that we do in order to ensure the sustainability, and also that we also hear what the community would be requiring.
Dennis, that's a great example of being needs driven, where you talked about the schools who have an existing requirement for students for their eyes to be tested, and I can think of lots of examples of service learning in Manchester. Some of my colleagues are here today who would give similar examples to that. One of the things, I don't know if the question's for you, Dennis, or you, Grace, but one of the follow-ups to that would be around the evaluation. Then, what sort of methodologies have you used to ensure that school, for example, that you talk about, Dennis, how do we capture their perspective and bring that into the evaluation?
Yeah. Grace, can I answer first?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
At least for this set of students, we're still waiting for the responses because it's going to be handled by our students and our teachers. But last year, working again with Grace's class on AI, our students asked the students who were part of the project about the things that they've learned. And this is something that probably, I have to tell you, because they're supposed to be learning computers and all that in the schools, but the schools that we went to, they don't have, they have a computer room, but there are no computers in in that room. So when the students asked the students who were involved in the project about what they've learned, it was good. I mean, they learned a lot from the project. They learned a lot from the service that we provided the students. And also, on my part, it's not documented like what our students did, but we have, for example, the teachers telling us that usually they would involve, there will be science competitions, and they usually lose because there's no AI component. But because of the AI service that we did in the community, Hong Kong Polytechnic and University of the Philippines, they can now compete, to the science, high schools in the city. So I think those are the things that, those are the information that you receive that that helps us continue the work that we do. So yeah.
Grace, you thanks, Dennis. Grace, you talked a lot about the framework, and you've done a lot of quantitative analysis. Where does that kind of partner stakeholder feedback come into your evaluation framework?
Yeah, thank you, Julian, for the question. So we do have standard evaluations for community partner feedback. Now, but having said that, caveating, a lot of times this community partner feedback will have to be filled in, will have to be completed by some representative, okay? Be it the NGO, be it the university or whatever, right? A lot of times it's not really feasible to distribute that form directly to like inhabitants of the, I mean, even just thinking about verifying whether or not you really were a recipient, all of that. I mean, I don't even want to think about it, right? So in terms of, so if with that caveat, we definitely do measure the impact on the community by a self-reported feedback from our community partner. But another way that we also see that is by seeing whether the project continues, right? When we look at sustainability, because honestly, in order for the community to receive our students, they also have to go to quite a lot of effort. They also have to do quite a lot of work. And if this was not a meaningful project, if this was not of impact, if they did not see that this was useful, they wouldn't ask us to come back next year. Right. So that is one of the things that we actually are seeing. And that's one of the ways that we measure or that we track, so to speak, the impact of the different subjects and of the different projects. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Grace. We've got time maybe for one more question. If anybody would like to ask a question, please feel. I've got a manual hand up there from Stephen, I think, rather than a digital one, but I can see it. So thanks, Stephen. And a good old-fashioned hand. Hi, Stephen. Over to you for your question. Hope you're well.
Good to see everybody. Like this is, I just want to respond to the previous question because it was such an important question and so exciting that I have to jump in. When Grace mentioned that, like when PolyU first decided to do service learning, there was a great debate. And one of the major sticking point was whether to make it compulsory for everybody. And I was there. I was the coordinator for the working group, which wrote the proposal. I was there at the Senate when they debated, and finally, well, I don't know whether I probably shouldn't tell you the number, but finally we have to come to a vote, and it was quite clear, but there was quite a bit of a dissenters to this debate. But I think finally, what won the debate was that service learning is not voluntary work. Voluntary work should be voluntary, but service learning is not voluntary work. Service learning is something that we believe in. It is so good that everybody should benefit from at least once. That's really what the argument was. And as Grace mentioned, what really make the students learn or not learn is not whether they really join the project willingly, but it is the experience that we provide for the students. if they have a good experience, if they have exciting projects, if they have clearly defined social issues, if we provide them with the tools to actually make a contribution, if they see their effort actually create some real benefit from the community, they learn. Now, coming back a little bit, a lot of students learn not because they are willingly studying something. The students study a lot of things that they are kind of forced to. Not that they choose to do it, but they still learn because they have a good experience. They find it meaningful, and that's why they learn. That's also one thing.
Yeah, and I thought a really good point that Grace made about the evaluation,
right.
How that showed there wasn't really a difference. I thought that was fascinating, Grace, about even students who weren't as persuaded about this, they get just as much. I think it's so powerful to have that evidence, particularly in a university. So yeah, I'd be really keen to look at that research myself. So thanks for sharing that. Thanks, Stephen, for giving that kind of more historical perspective. You were there when Hong Kong PolyU was really pioneering all of this, and you've been so kind in sharing your expertise over the years as well. So thanks, everyone, for your valuable contributions to today. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to Grace and to Dennis and Minghui and Eugene for sharing such thoughtful and diverse perspectives I think we've got today from right across the globe. And what we've seen, I think, today is this really shared commitment from people around the world to embedding social responsibility into the learning environment. Just to end on a personal note, I'd just like to ask each of the panelists in the order in which they have presented today, if you had to finish with one word that motivates you personally to do this work on service learning, what's the one word you think would about why you do what you do to embed service learning and community engagement into learning? So Grace, could you give me one word, please?
I'll use a phrase, shared humanity.
Shared humanity, a phrase. You're slightly testing me there. That's good. I like that. Shared humanity. Grace. Dennis.
I'll do commitment.
Pardon?
Commitment.
Commitment. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commitment. Minghui.
Connections.
Connections. And Eugene. Is Eugene still? Yeah, Eugene, if you got one word. Sorry, you're on mute. Sorry.
Collaboration.
Collaboration. So we've got shared humanity, commitment, connection, and collaboration. I think that's such a beautiful way to end. It's really striking how much meaning can be packed into those single words. And whatever your word was, I think it reminds us, those words there, about why this work is important. It's not just about pedagogy and policy. It's also this endeavor around service learning is deeply rooted in our values, of course, and our sense of purpose in our organization. So, and just to finish off, let's do what President Teng says, always do what is possible. What a brilliant quote, always do what is possible. So we'll end on that shared sense of motivation. Thank you again to our speakers and to everyone who's joined us today. Do keep an eye out for future sessions as well in this USR series. So until then, thank you very much for joining us in what's been a really inspiring conversation this morning, this afternoon, this evening. Thank you very much and goodbye.